Good afternoon, Frank.
Hello, Professor.
A lot has happened since we talked last,
A lot always happens.
and it seems to happen faster and faster. But it seems to me, most of it anyway, to fall under the heading of something we talked about some time ago. I'm not sure whether we used the term then, but I think of it as translocality. Did I use that term
No,
before?
you did not use that term.
It's a term that was coined by somebody in the mid-90s, I think, that I paid no attention to at the time because I thought it was just coinage for coinage's sake. But in fact, I'm beginning to think now that it's quite useful. We think of the world as being divided up in a particular way. We think in terms of a map, and we take that map for granted. And we don't realize that we're giving certain evaluations to every place on the map. I mean, apart from the fact that Australia, because it's down there, is obviously not important.
Right, right, right.
But in much more complex ways than that. And the reason that's interesting now is that everything we think about so many places is changing, and we're beginning to evaluate the places differently. And I think that's happening as a consequence still of the Geneva Accords. Things keep on happening in the Middle East that are essential. It wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for that accord that was arrived at in Geneva in, is it a month ago now?
Well, it's about a month ago, but as you well know, I saw a headline several hours ago saying that the two sides are frantically working to try to repair the accord.
Yeah.
So God knows what's been agreed to.
Well, the problem is that somebody over here has got Obama to reinforce some of the existing sanctions, and that's being understood on the Iranian side as against the spirit of the accord.
Mm-hmm.
I think quite justifiably.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and I assume that he had to do it here for political reasons, because he's being accused of being too lenient on the Iranians.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure that's what they're arguing about.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems as though every day something happens in the Middle East that probably wouldn't have happened, and if it wasn't for that accord, and it changes the whole configuration of diplomatic relations between each and every country. What are the latest things? Well,
the Saudi member of the royal family, Prince Turkey,
yeah,
coming out with that interview in the Wall Street Journal.
yeah,
That was fairly scathing, I thought.
yeah, and that's fairly direct. There are a lot of
Yes.
indirect things going on as well. The BBC today was interviewing an Iraqi Shia fighter in Syria.
Okay.
So the Iraqi Shia are now fighting in Syria
Against
against,
Assad.
well, no, against. They claim that they're not fighting for Assad, that they have no interest in Assad, but they're simply helping out the Shia who are being attacked by Sunni jihadists.
Okay. I
And
see.
and this is obviously the increase of Iranian influence through Iraq in what is happening in Syria.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Erdogan has faded out of the picture,
Mm-hmm.
and there's been a joint declaration between Iran and Turkey, whereas before the Geneva Accord, the relations between Iran and Turkey would be getting more and more difficult. And Turkey was trying to be the new leader of the Eastern Mediterranean Muslim world.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the politics in Turkey seem to be getting rather complicated as well. So this may have as much to do with internal politics as the external situation. I'm not sure.
Let me ask you a question. I mean, it seems to me, from a layperson's perspective, my own, that the Iranians are on the ascendancy here in the whole region. Now, historically speaking, all right, when you look at the Ibn Saud regime, a group of Bedouins, tribal Bedouins, with one tribe being supreme. When you look at the the mishmash that is modern-day Turkey. When you look at those factionalized Arab states along the eastern Mediterranean, and you look at that whole geographic area, and you overlay that against the whole thousands of years of Persian culture and Persian historical influence, if not outright rule, perhaps not necessarily in that area, but certainly nearby. How does this play out? I mean, is it a sense currently in the year 2013 of resentment against the Iranians, or is it more a sense of, okay, they're reassuming their rightful place at the table?
Nobody would know anything about the situation before Islam if the Europeans, and particularly the British, hadn't begun scholarship on the pre-Islamic world there because of their interest in Herodotus and classical studies in the 19th century.
No one would know about this.
No, I mean, even the Iranians wouldn't know about it.
Okay.
They'd forgotten what Cyrus's tomb was. They thought it was the tomb of the mother of Solomon.
They did?
Yeah. I don't know what they thought Persepolis was. I can't remember.
Okay.
But all that was rediscovered in the 19th century by the British and then taken up by the Iranian intellectuals who became very nationalist, starting in the late 19th century, but most especially between the wars.
Okay.
And then, of course, was used by Mohammad Reza Shah for the 2,500th anniversary of the of the Persian monarchy.
Yes.
Which in turn led to the revolution.
Right. So all of that history is it's really not there in terms of modern day.
But what is spreading out, rumors about it now, or information that's spreading out about it now, simply exacerbates the situation. And this current situation really goes back to 1500, when for the first time since the beginning of Islam, a group of Turks, or Turkish speakers, in northwestern Iran, close to what is now the border between Iran and Azerbaijan, set up a new empire under the name Safavid.
Yes.
Which became one of the three gunpowder empires, the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the Mughals. And that was a Shia empire.
Okay.
Now, there had been a Shia empire before in the around 1000 AD that operated out of Iraq, but that was...
Were they the Seleucids or the Abbasids? No, not the Seleucids.
No, under the Abbasids, but I'm trying to remember what they were called, and I'm afraid I can't remember. Buwayhids.
Okay.
But they had sort of been forgotten in history by this time. But since 1500, Iran has come to the fore again as a rival to Orthodox Islam. And Iran has been majority Shia since that time. It lost Afghanistan in the middle of the 18th century, but has a Shia colony in the middle of Afghanistan. It has the south of Iraq, because that's where all the Shia holy places, or the major Shia holy places, are. And Iraq was always a battleground between the Ottomans and the Safavids anyway. And it's got its outpost of the Shia in Lebanon. And so that's what's been causing the trouble, but it was kept under tabs in the colonial period and through the neo-colonial period until the aftermath of 9/11, simply because of the way each state in the Middle East, which had been defined after the First World War, was still maintained non-democratically by Western support. But that Western support has really disappeared since W invaded Iraq. So that's what's. I mean, it's that 9/11 is really what changed everything, or the American response to 9/11. And now it's getting worse and worse with this, and we call it a sectarian warfare because that's a term we like, and it makes us sound good and them sound bad. Mm-hmm. But in fact, it's these historical factors that are coming out again.
So how does the historical factor of the Shia with the Iranians, I mean, how does that mesh now with the Sunnis in Saudi Arabia, for example, or in Syria?
You remember, I think I've said before that Khomeini, one of his famous quotes is, "In Islam, everything is politics."
Yes. Yes.
The Shia have the biggest problem in Islamic philosophy is how you organize government, how you organize authority in this world mm-hmm. to represent authority in the other world. And the Shia totally disagree. The main difference between the Shia and the Sunni are the answer to that question.
Right.
And,
the Sunni, so if I'm clear, and I know you'll explain, but the Sunni are relatively indifferent to government so long as it remains in place to provide a religious ability to worship Allah.
Both the Shia and the Sunni, historically, that means up until very recently, have assumed that you have to have a government, mm-hmm. But whoever's in government should do what he is told by the senior Islamic scholars.
Okay.
But the senior Islamic scholars are chosen in very different ways by the Sunnis from the way they're chosen by the Shia. Mm-hmm. And then when Khomeini came in, he, since the 1940s, had been developing this idea of the velayat-e-faqih, the guardianship of the jurisprudent, is mm-hmm. the word usually translated, which of course makes it unintelligible. But in the 1870s, almost the same time as the doctrine of the infallibility of the Pope was enunciated in Rome, the Shia, and this is sheer chance, but it's very interesting that similar things happen at the same time in world history, developed or formalized an idea that had been developing for some time, which was that in every generation there was a senior Shia cleric who was the ultimate authority on earth of the hidden imam. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Khomeini in the 1940s said that that person should not be quietist, as he had been up until that point, but should be very present in the, what should I say, I forget what words he used, but that the government should ask him about everything and make sure they got their permission to do what they did.
Okay.
And then when the incumbent Shia leader died, Khomeini took over. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so he became the superior Shia cleric, and he had this idea of the fact that the person in that position was the guardian of the government. Mm-hmm. That's the basis of the system after the Iranian Revolution. So that's a direct statement of opposition to the way the Sunni think about political power.
Quite direct, quite directly contrary. So that is presumably, I mean, what scares the daylights out of the House of Saud.
Yeah, and that's why, I mean, it's everything that gets reported about these things in the Western press is, you can't say it's incorrect, but it's there's something wrong with the emphasis. It's used in Western terms to explain something that is based on non-Western principles.
Right.
It'd be misleading.
Now, the Sunni Islamic clerics, for example, in Saudi Arabia, are relatively tame.
The Wahhabis are tame?
Well, aren't they tame insofar as being subservient to the government?
No, the government has to be very careful of them.
But I thought there was some sort of an unspoken agreement between the House of Saud and the
Well,
Wahhabi
there is an
Imams.
unspoken agreement because without the Wahhabi clerics, the House of Saud wouldn't be there.
Right.
But the House of Saud is very careful about going against them.
Okay.
Uh,
Yes.
and it's very difficult because there's a big Shia minority what part? The part of Saudi Arabia near the Gulf, which is close to where all the oil is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In
Um,
eastern Saudi Arabia. Right.
that's yes, it's the east really. Yeah, it's just that Saudi Arabia is a square that isn't.
Right. But those Shia, of course, are severed or disconnected from the Wahhabis.
Yes,
Very much so.
but they're in the kingdom,
Mm.
and so they're part of the problem that the Saudi royal family has to deal with. They can't be even-handed to the Shia because of their dependence on the Wahhabi clerics,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a part of the reason why Bahrain is such a mess at the moment.
Right. So when you're a Saudi ruler, I mean, you have to look at the making sure you keep on the right side of the Wahhabi clerics. You have to make sure that this increasing Shia minority in eastern Saudi Arabia that is allegiant not to you, but in fact to the supreme leader in Tehran.
Not necessarily, because Khamenei in Tehran has a rival in southern Iraq who
Okay.
happens to be of Iranian extraction. His name is Sistani.
Right. Right.
Uh,
I forgot.
and he's played an important role in southern Iraq since the Bush campaign there.
Well, I'm just, I know we're coming down to the end, but I keep seeing headlines that say the United States is going to be an exporter of oil any day now. I keep seeing the Saudis increasingly complain about the fact that their American allies no longer like them. And I keep seeing fear expressed at the ascendancy of Iran. And then I keep seeing this discussion that we have now as to how it must look from inside the ruling Saudi apparatus. I mean, it must look very bleak to them.
And if we can go back to what I said at the beginning, the fact that the map is changing.
Mm-hmm.
Because until certainly not much more than 10 years ago, we were right to see the Middle East as a pattern of countries that and all the boundaries were drawn by,
The colonials.
yeah, and all those boundaries are now being questioned.
Yeah, it's
Because,
almost like they don't exist in some
yeah, they're
respects.
not relevant anymore.
Oh, very interesting.
Fascinating. So watch carefully what happens in the coming week.
Yes, yes. Well, all right. I shall. Thank you very much. Happy holiday, Professor Stoner.
Thank you, and the same
All
to
right.
you.
Thank you. All right.